Hi folks, my name is Emmanuel John. Welcome to Addiction Questions and Answers. Today we have a question from Ashton in Washington State. It's a long question, so I'm going to try to summarize it a little bit, shorten it a little bit. Basically, he asks, why do people become addicted to some drugs and not other drugs? Why are some drugs more addictive physically, and why are some less addictive physically and seem more like a habit? Well, the question is a long one, and I have written a book. I've written two, actually. The first one I wrote was called Addiction, Why They Use, and it really does answer the question why. It talks a lot about why people behave the way they do, why they become so attached to the drug. And that's probably the difficult part of addiction. There are two basic aspects of addiction, two ways that we become addicted to a chemical. The first way is physically. That's the one we most know. We think of physical addiction. We think of, I can't quit smoking. If I quit drinking coffee, I get a headache. People who are opiates are very physically addicted to them. But there's a weird balance between physical and psychological addiction. So as a therapist and a person who's worked extensively with relapse prevention, I've focused the majority of my career on the psychological, emotional side of addiction, and I believe it's the toughest one. Why? We can take a drug out of a body and eventually a body returns to the way it was before. Let's define a drug. A drug is any substance that alters the function of an organism. So what that means is that when the drug, the chemical, is put into the body, it changes the way it operates somehow. And this is goes for everything from aspirin to narcotics. From Tylenol, they all change the way your body operates. They change the way it functions. People pick their drug of choice eventually because they like the way it changes their organism, the way it changes their body. Using a chemical changes your mood. That's why we call them mood-altering chemicals. So here's the problem, and we'll talk about the physiological real quick if we can. If you use something, the body becomes used to it. If your heart rate's at 72 beats a minute and you take a drug that makes it go up to 80, if you keep taking that drug, eventually your body will adjust so that it's back at that 72 homeostasis. Well, if you stop taking the drug, it's going to drop initially, and then the body will have to return back. So that's kind of the physical. Drugs either speed up a process in the body for the most part or slow them down. It can speed up your brain, make you think faster. It can slow your brain down. It can speed up pain messages or slow pain messages down, which is what painkillers do. So we have the physiological and the psychological. The physiological, we'll let the medical people deal with. They've learned how to withdraw people successfully and how to take people off of a drug with less discomfort. When we put a patch on to quit smoking, what we're doing is we're addressing the physiological, and then all we have to deal with is the psychological. So really, the patch just kind of lets you off the hook for trying to quit the psychological. I'm upset, I want to go smoke. I get in the car, I want to smoke. Those are called conditioned responses, and they're somewhat emotional. The faster a drug gets into your body, the more psychologically addictive it is. Meaning that if I'm not feeling good, I take a chemical and I feel better. The quicker I feel better, the more I like that drug, the more habit forming it becomes. Okay, so here's the difficult spot. We think a lot of times, I'm not sure what happened with the focus here, we think sometimes that it doesn't matter that much. Well, it really does. And if we look at cocaine and cocaine addiction, if a person snorts a chemical, cocaine, it takes somewhere between 45 seconds to about a minute and 15 seconds for the person to begin to feel the drug, to feel the chemical. If they shoot the drug, it takes anywhere, usually about 9, 10, 11, 12, 15 seconds, up to 18 seconds for the body to feel it. If a person smokes crack, basically it takes them about, by the time they inhale, it starts about 2 or 3 seconds in. So they begin to feel, their brain automatically begins to feel that thing even faster. So yes, smoking is actually quicker than shooting a chemical. The reason why people have such a difficulty with cocaine or crack cocaine is because it's so fast, it's so instant, and it's an immediate flip of a switch inside the body. And it's also a chemical reaction that's equated to sex in the body, very similar as an orgasm. So that's an emotional attachment to that. So here's what happens over time with the psychological addiction. The longer I use a chemical, the more often I use a chemical, and the more often it rewards me with the change in behavior that I'm seeking. If I went and tried to, if you went and tried to eat a drug like LSD and you kept getting LSD but it wasn't working, every time you took it, it wasn't working, every time you took it, it was fake, it wasn't working, or it was old, or whatever, eventually you would stop trying it because it was a waste of time. If every time you took it, you got exactly what you were looking for out of it, you become more emotionally attached to it. Same thing happens with people, and the same thing happens with places that we can go in our neighborhood. If we go to a park and we feel good every time we go, we have a connection, a fondness for that. So, physiological aside, psychological is different for different drugs, Ashton, because maybe I'm a depressive person and I like the lift that cocaine gives me. Or maybe I have ADD and I take a cocaine and its stimulant properties actually sort of reverse and allow me to sort of calm my brain down. So whatever it is that I'm looking for, if I am uncomfortable and I just don't want to think and want to shut my brain off, and I take opiates and it allows me to shut down and sort of nod out and go down and not have to worry and not be up and anxious. Or for manic people, sometimes that's a good drug that they like because it actually slows them down. People who are bipolar, who experience ups and downs, have an affinity to go towards marijuana. Not because they like what marijuana does or because marijuana treats it, and this is true for a lot of different issues with marijuana, is that if I smoke weed, I know how I'm going to feel. And if I have an emotional state where it's unpredictable, I don't know if I'm up, I don't know if I'm down, I don't know if I'm happy, sad, I never know one day from the other. If I find a drug like marijuana and every time I use it, it gives me exactly what I was looking for, it makes me feel exactly the way I knew I was going to feel, instead of having to live with some unpredicted, I'm going to be anxious, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to be happy, I can be high. I know what high feels like. I know what opiate feels like. I know what alcohol feels like. And I want to feel that one feeling. So that's an emotional connection. People are driving you crazy in your world. You know that if you have a couple of drinks, you know how you're going to feel, and you like that way better than the other way. So, and then people treat stress. If you have stress and you treat it with your drug, with a chemical, every time you have stress, you're going to want to treat it with that chemical. And the more it works, the more often it works, the more often you're going to be likely to do it. So, yeah, I talk fast. That's a lot of information in there. We often hear about behavioral. We hear about Pavlov's dog. We have a stimulus, and then we have a reward. You can smell the weed, you feel better later. The smell of weed will make you think, I'm going to feel better later. You'll like the smell of marijuana. So if you want to quit using a chemical, the best thing you can do is quit one addiction at a time. It's hard to quit both the physiological and the psychological, and that's why we get back to the patch. If we take the patch allows us to deal with the psychological while treating the physical cravings and withdrawal. So quit one, then the other. Stop making it an emotional response. If you want to break the psychological addiction to something, you take it away from your emotion and away from whims and when you want and cravings, and you do it by time. If you want to quit smoking cigarettes, you say, okay, I can smoke, but I have to smoke between 1 o'clock and 5 after 1. Okay? And I can't, if I miss between 1 and 5 after 1, I have to wait till 2. If I miss between 2 and 5 after 2, then I have to wait till 4. And then what you're doing is you're making it a mathematical formula. And believe me, if you want to smoke, you'll know when it's 2. You'll know when it's 4 o'clock because you'll want that cigarette. But it takes it away from the emotional connection. Stop using the chemical. Sorry about the focus here. Stop using the chemical when you are used to using the chemical. When you get in the car, don't smoke the cigarette. First thing you do when you get up in the morning, don't drink the coffee right away. Don't make that the first thing that you ingest. That's an emotional connection to the chemical. It treats the physiological withdrawal. Same with the cigarette in the morning. But don't do it in the same place at the same time. That's called conditioned response. And it's an association between chemicals. A beer and a cigarette, a coffee and a cigarette, they go good together. That's because you're conditioned for that feeling. So again, the book has a lot more answers to it, to these questions. It explains it in much more detail than I can do here in a couple minutes. I hope that helps Ashton, and anybody else who has questions, you can submit them either to whytheyuse@gmail.com, or you can submit them to the Facebook pages for Addiction, Am I Powerless, or Addiction, Why They Use. handbook for anyone who loves an alcoholic or addict. You can see both of those and even buy the books on addictioninthefamily.com. Again, that's addictioninthefamily.com. I think I'll have a link up here by the time I'm done processing the video, and we'll go from there. I hope it helps. Addiction is insidious. It is a very difficult thing. One of the most difficult issues that a human being will face emotionally in their lifetimes. And once we treat an emotional problem with a chemical, and then we have an emotional problem related to the chemical, it requires even more use, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. So anyway, long story short, I hope that you're not suffering from addiction. I hope that a family member you love gets over it soon. I hope that you find recovery. There's a great world out there of everything else to do other than the chemical. So good luck to you in the new year. Best of luck to everybody, and have a good day. Thanks for tuning in.